Hello everyone, welcome to my latest top 10 video where I take a look back at pro wrestling history and create a top 10 list based on something that's currently going on in pro wrestling or something that tickles my interest. Whatever, I'm just pulling these things out of my ass. Considering we had the Hell in a Cell pay-per-view this month, I thought it would be fun to take a look back at steel cage match variations. Now, in the olden days, the steel cage match was the big feud ender. That was the huge climactic battle. You lock two guys that hate each other inside of a steel cage and just let them go. Some of the bloodiest, most violent matches of the 1970s and 1980s, especially, were contested inside of a steel cage. As the business progressed and creative minds got involved in the business, shall we say, there was room to grow the steel cage and make it bigger and better and come up with new ideas to make the steel cage even more special than it already was. Some examples of excellent steel cage match variations or evolutions were War Games, obviously, the Hell in a Cell, and the Elimination Chamber. All of those, I think most wrestling fans would agree, all of those are excellent additions, add-ons, or evolutions forward from the steel cage match, and have served the pro wrestling business very well for the most part since their creations. Here I'm going to be taking a look at the steel cage match variations that didn't work. The ones that were like, ooh, that wasn't a great idea. And going over this top 10 list, before I even say anything, I'm just going to point out that there is a lot of WCW and TNA on this list, especially from Lockdown. Lockdown, the pay-per-view that I've been making fun of ever since it was created. It's completely ridiculous to have 8 steel cage matches on one pay-per-view, and having to have so many steel cage matches on one pay-per-view led to the creation of several dumb cage match variations, and some of those appeared on this list. So in trying to make all the matches different, they created something stupid. And there are other examples too where it's like they try to create something special or create something different and try to create a new match type that they can use just as much as like Hell in a Cell or the Elimination Chamber or something like that. Or in the case of War Games, turn it into some kind of an annual event. But God, these just did not work. These did not work at all. So I'm going to go over the list, and let's start with number 10. Number 10 from TNA, the Steel Asylum / the Terror Dome. This was an X Division showcase match, kind of like TNA's way of combining both the Steel Cage match and the Ultimate X by making it kind of a high wire free-for-all where the object was, the Steel Cage was this red barred cage that surrounded the ring with a dome on top. And the object was to climb out of the dome. So it kind of had, like I said, it had kind of an Ultimate X aspect to it. And I believe the match has its origins in AAA. I've never seen any of the AAA editions of this type of match, but the TNA one, which they did at TNA Sacrifice 2008, TNA Bound for Glory 2008, and more infamously, the January 4th, 2010 Impact, where they opened up the show and the finish had to be changed on the fly because poor Homicide, who was supposed to win the thing, couldn't climb out of the cage, so they had to call a DQ and just call the worst audible ever. Yeah, DQ in a steel cage match. But basically the object was to cram as many X Division guys into this match as possible, ranging from like 8 to 10 to 12 or whatever. And the object was to, the first one who was able to climb out of the cage was the winner. And that was the goal. And they were basically just empty spot fests. You kind of knew what you were getting whenever you watched one of these things. So it gave you good X Division action and like a spot festy type of match if that's what you were looking for. So it's not like they were boring to watch. The biggest problem as a television audience, though, is the big red bars were created in such a way that it was very hard to get a good look at what was going on inside the ring. And there's another match on this list that has that same problem, but it didn't shoot as well as the Cyclone Fence type of deal, and it was hard to shoot with. It was poorly produced. The red bars looked like, I don't know, made it look like some kind of a children's toy or something, and it just wasn't very good. There was typically no story behind it. Like I said, it was just kind of, hey, let's just cram a bunch of X Division guys into a match and do some spots, and that was pretty much all the thought that was put into it. And they were matches that were pretty much, they were what they were. Yeah. And like I said, the one on the January 4th Impact really laid an egg when the winner couldn't even climb outside the thing, which I feel like that's something they should have figured out before they started shooting, but maybe I'm just crazy. Maybe that's just me being a complainer. But yeah, the Steel Asylum, the Terror Dome, it was an example of lack of story, poor production, and just cramming a bunch of guys into a match just for the sake of doing spots. And that was pretty much all there was to it. And it never really got over as one of the great cage match variations because of it. All right, number 9, another one from TNA, the Doomsday Chamber of Blood from TNA Hard Justice 2007 and Lockdown 2009. And they may have done it a few other times, I don't remember, but those were the two that really stood out to me. Basically, the point of the Doomsday Chamber of Blood is you can't get the pin or the submission over your opponent until they start bleeding. To me, that's such an unnecessary rule that I wonder what the point is. And to me, like, I'm kind of old school minded when it comes to steel cage matches. I really do feel like that most, if not all, cage matches should have blood in them, just because of the nature of what they're supposed to be and what they're supposed to accomplish. So to have a cage match where it says someone has to bleed, to me is kind of stupid and redundant, especially on a pay-per-view like Lockdown, where guys were bleeding all over the show anyway. So why is there a match where you're promising blood when everyone on the show is going to bleed anyway, because you're cramming everybody into a fucking cage match for some stupid reason? But anyway, yeah, the Doomsday Chamber of Blood, this was a match that they tried to make like a specialty of the Monster Abyss, another violent match like the Monster's Ball for him to throw in there and do his hardcore stuff. And I don't think the matches were exceptionally bad or anything. They weren't great. They weren't winners, but they weren't like the worst matches ever. It's just such a stupid rule. I don't even know why it's there. And really, it's one of the few cases where it's not so much that the matches themselves are terrible, it's just that the rule is so dumb, I don't even know why it's there to begin with. Especially since the match is going to end in pinfall or submission anyway. So it just seems like a pointless rule to me. So, yeah, just a pointless variation. Number 8, we're heading into WCW year 2000, a treasure trove for garbage material for pro wrestling. The Asylum Match, a match that was designed to be a specialty of Scott Steiner. This one was held in a couple of editions of Monday Nitro in 2000. It was also held on the Great American Bash 2000. And like I said, this was a match that was designed to be a specialty of Scott Steiner's. He was put in there against his brother Rick. He was put in there against Shane Douglas. And at Great American Bash, he was put in there against both Rick Steiner and Tank Abbott in a handicap match. And I think this match, the idea of giving Steiner his own specialty match isn't a bad idea. I think back to another good cage match variation, the Lion's Den, which was created for Ken Shamrock in the WWF. And I thought that was, again, it was done to kind of create that shoot fight UFC type of feel, but I thought it worked. And I thought, I was like, oh, that's kind of neat. And I wouldn't mind if the WWE brought back the Lion's Den for like Brock Lesnar or Ronda Rousey or something like that. Just throwing ideas out there. I mean, I really think back to the one that Shamrock and Owen Hart had at SummerSlam. I was like, wow, that was actually a pretty good match. And I think Steiner's Asylum could have been the same thing if it was done a little differently. Or even if they just ripped off the Lion's Den and gave it to Scott Steiner, I would have been okay with that. But the Asylum in question was basically like, and the WrestleCrap article described it as like a big bird cage. And I think that's the best way to describe it. Now, the second I say bird cage, I think of Tweety Bird. I'm just a tweet little bird in a gilded cage. Tweety's my name, but I don't know my age. I'm not singing the whole song, but anyway. Scott Steiner would have these matches with people, and it would basically just be an excuse for him to rough somebody up inside of a cage. The problem was that this big bird cage looking thing fit inside the surface of the ring. It didn't go around the ring, and it wasn't its own separate structure somewhere else like the Lion's Den was. It fit inside the ropes of the ring. So you're working with a very small space to have a match inside of, and it created some very awkward matches. If you go back and watch them, like Steiner tries to do belly-to-belly suplexes. He can't do it. You can't really do spots in there because it's such a small space to work with. It's very limiting. And I think if you're going to use that structure The best way to do it would be if you have a monster character, say Lucha Underground, the Monster Matanza, and let's say they're doing the sacrifice to the gods right now in season 4. Instead of doing the thing where he raises his arms and the lights go out and the person disappears like he, friggin' disappeared and was sacrificed to the gods, they did like the sacrifice to the gods in a way where if Matanza wins, you get locked inside the cage with Matanza for like 2 minutes or something, and he just kills you for 2 minutes. And leaves you a bloody mess. Something like that. Like, let's say Steiner wins a match, and if he wins, you get locked inside let's say Steiner's a babyface, which he wasn't necessarily. Well, in WCW, you couldn't tell who the faces or the heels were at that point. But anyway, let's say Steiner's a babyface, and if he wins, he's going after this evil manager like a Bobby Heenan or a Paul Heyman or something like that. And if he wins, he gets put into the asylum for 5 minutes with the evil manager. Something like that. It would work as maybe as like a post-match stipulation or something, not as the actual match itself. Because like I said, the structure was way too limiting and a bit of a mess and never should have happened. So, yeah, poorly designed idea. Again, I like what they were thinking, like giving Steiner his own specialty match, but this one really, really didn't work. Number 7, we're back to TNA Lockdown. The Prince of Darkness Deathmatch / Blindfold match from TNA Lockdown 2005 and TNA Lockdown 2007. Again, in an attempt to make all the steel cage matches different when they did their Lockdown pay-per-view, TNA had to add gimmicks on top of all the cage matches. We had table matches inside of a cage, which makes no sense if you think about it. We had a War Games match, which was the Lethal Lockdown, their version of it. We had an arm wrestling match one year inside of a cage. It was like, all right. And this constant, like, having to add gimmicks on top of the cage just seems ridiculous to me and just adds to how stupid it is to have so many cage matches on one pay-per-view. But probably the dumbest, or one of the dumbest ideas, was the Prince of Darkness death match or the Blindfold match. Now, the match that Bobby Roode and Dustin Rhodes had in 2005, truth be told, wasn't a bad match. It was overbooked to hell. It was a 2 out of 3 falls match with the third fall being a blindfold match and all of it inside of a steel cage. Sounds a bit overbooked, although if we want to talk about overbooked cage matches, there was that famous match from Mid-South between Hacksaw Jim Duggan and Ted DiBiase, which was a tuxedo coal miner's glove on a pole match inside of a steel cage. I'm like, that's a bit much. I feel like you only need one of those, maybe 2 if you're feeling you're feeling a bit zesty that day, maybe 2, but that match turned out really well, so that one won't be showing up on this list. But here, I thought the match between Roode and Dustin Rhodes actually wasn't a bad match, and they got around the blindfold gimmick as much as possible, although why have a blindfold match gimmick in the first place? So they kind of got out of that one unscathed, even though it was overbooked. That was not the case in 2007, where they got Chris Harris and James Storm, one of the best feuds they had going at the time with the AMW split and the former tag partners going at it. And these two would eventually have an amazing match at the very next pay-per-view at Sacrifice, the Texas Death Match. I still hold up there as one of the best matches in TNA's history. And they would have another match on Impact as a King of the Mountain qualifier as well that was also very good. Their blindfold match at Lockdown was not very good. This one, again, I don't think the blindfold match gimmick itself is that bad. Like I said, I thought Jake Roberts and Rick Martel had a really good one at WrestleMania 7. I'm a fan of that match, and I know a lot of people aren't, but I actually do like that match. And I think if you're creative enough and you've got the right psychology and you've got the right feud, you can make a blindfold match work. But when you're putting both guys in a steel cage match, former partners going at each other in a blood feud, and you put them in a steel cage on a pay-per-view like this, putting blindfolds on them is just going to limit them and kind of take away what the fans really want. And you could sense the frustration from Harris and Storm while the match was in progress. The hoods kept falling off. The crowd completely shit on it, was chanting "Fire Russo" and everything else you could possibly imagine. It's just a shame that this great feud that they had going has this huge black eye on it, which is one of the worst matches in TNA history. Through no fault of the guys. I think they did the best they could with what they had, but it was a disaster. And again, just another example of why combining gimmicks and trying to dress up a steel cage match on a pay-per-view with all steel cage matches tells me at the very least that maybe they shouldn't have steel cage matches, or they shouldn't have a pay-per-view with all steel cage matches. But yeah, the blindfold match, not one of my favorites. Number 6, another one from Lockdown. This one from 2008. Probably the most ridiculous of the bunch. Cuffed in the Cage. This was a match where Vince Russo, in his infinite wisdom, decided that they needed to lock 12 guys inside the steel cage, the 6 sides of steel at the time for TNA. And the object of the match was to handcuff them to the steel cage. And if you were handcuffed to the steel cage, you were eliminated. And it would keep going until there was only one person left. And I just look at this like, that is the dumbest thing I have ever heard. That is so stupid. You may as well just, like, I guess it's their way of having a battle royal inside of a steel cage, but it's still so stupid. Like, I don't know, like, what's the intrigue in that? First of all, you're cramming way too many guys in too small of a space. That's number one. This wasn't like they had a 2-ring setup like War Games. It was a, very limited space for 12 guys or however many it was to operate with. And then the whole object being, oh, you got to handcuff them to the cage, and you get eliminated when you handcuff them to the cage. And I'm like, that is so stupid. I mean, to me, that's right up there with the reverse battle royal. I know the reverse battle royal catches a lot of shit, and I'm like, dude, cuffed in the cage is right up there as being as stupid, maybe stupider. And again, it's just another example of they tried to make every match at Lockdown different. Didn't always work. And that's how it is. And this one was a mess. This one was a total mess. But but stay tuned for more. We got more Lockdown to look forward to. Next up is a WCW creation, and it's kind of, I'm kind of cheating here. I'm using multiple matches in one setup. The Tower of Doom from NWA's Great American Bash 1988, the Doomsday Cage match from Uncensored 96, WCW, and War Games Russo's Revenge from WCW Nitro in September 2000. They're different matches in a way with different rule structures, but they all have kind of a similar setup where it's like multiple cage structures all used in one match. The Tower of Doom had this weird setup where they start at the top, and then the two teams are fighting each other and have to work their way down to the ring where the main cage is and then get out. And the whole goal was to escape, and it looked like a children's playground game. The Doomsday Cage, which admittedly was a cool structure with all the different cages going around and Hogan and Savage having to go from one room to the other. The structure looked cool. The problem was the whole psychology of it was the dumbest thing I've ever heard, where Hogan and Savage basically had to beat 45 people to win a match and buried half the friggin' WCW roster. And that one was bad purely because of psychology being completely stupid. And War Games Russo's Revenge was basically the use of the triple cage that was most famously used in the match with David Arquette, and I believe it was used in the Ready to Rumble movie. I've never seen Ready to Rumble, but the triple cage actually looked really cool. The Tower of Doom looked really cool as well. It's just the rule structure was stupid. Doomsday Cage looked cool with the multiple cage structure. The problem was that the match made no sense. And War Games Russo's Revenge just whatever. It was just a poor return for War Games. But the triple cage structure actually looked really friggin' cool, and I thought shot well. And actually, I thought the main event where they did use the triple cage, minus David Arquette, I thought was actually a pretty good match. It was a bit wild, a bit crazy, and had a guitar room, which is a little silly. But with a little work, I mean, the whole triple cage multi-structure setup could be awesome if you do it right, but the problem was they never did it right. And goddamn, NWA and WCW, they kept trying. And again, it's not all Russo either, because it goes like you get mid-90s WCW, you get 2000 WCW, and you even get late 80s NWA, and they had a dumb one too. So it's it's a shame that they couldn't make it work, because the structure and using multiple structures in one steel cage is actually, like, it looks pretty damn cool. More on that later from the WWF's equivalent of that, but this is one of unfulfilled potential, because I felt like with structures that looked as cool as those, I felt like that there was some way to make it work, and they couldn't make it work, which is unfortunate. Next up, WWE. First WWE entry on the list, the Punjabi prison match from the Great American Bash 2006, No Mercy 2007, and Battleground 2017. Probably the worst one of the bunch between Randy Orton and Jinder Mahal. But even before that match, I was not a fan of this match. It has the same problem that the Steel Asylum does that I talked about earlier, where it doesn't shoot well with the bamboo. It looks impressive, But when you actually watch a match in place where you have like the bamboo structure around the ring and then you have a bigger bamboo structure around the ringside area, and the goal is to escape from both structures, it actually looks cool and pretty daunting. The problem, though, is doesn't shoot well. Again, I go back to the Orton-Mahal match where I'm watching it and I'm just thinking, man, does this, can the audience even tell that there's a match going on? Because I'm, sitting at home watching it, I'm having a hard time even being able to tell what's going on inside the cage. So it doesn't shoot well, doesn't produce well. And the rule structure, again, it's very basic, escape the cage rules, which is fine. But the whole, like, open the door and you have a minute to open the door or it's permanently closed or whatever, just overcomplicates it and just makes it seem silly. And again, kind of like what I was talking about with the Tower of Doom match, it kind of gives it that like Nickelodeon game show feel to it rather than this daunting, violent match, which is obviously what they wanted this to be. And I can't think of, again, thinking back to all the other Punjabi prison matches, I can't think back to one where all 4 cage doors weren't shut permanently and they had to climb out over. Like, I'm pretty sure almost every single one, all 4 doors were shut, making like the earlier portions of the match completely pointless. So, yeah, not a fan of the Punjabi prison match, and I pray to God Almighty that it never comes back. Number 3, the final entry from TNA Lockdown. This one also from 2007, the Electrified cage match. Now, WCW or NWA also had the Thunder cage, which the idea was that the top of the cage was electrified, which is really stupid. But it didn't quite reach the levels of stupidity that this match did, where it was LAX versus Team 3D, and they were going to be locked inside of an electrified steel cage. Now, there's a huge problem. It sounds like awesome and dangerous and violent on paper. Here's the problem. There is no conceivable way that I can think of where you do the match where it's either A, not extremely dangerous, where you electrify the cage for real and the guys' lives are in danger, or it's fake as hell and nobody believes that the guys are being electrocuted. And fortunately, they went with the latter. I would rather have it be fake as hell than have anybody, like, endanger themselves for a stupid match. But nobody bought the phony sound effects that were played over the PA system whenever somebody touched the cage. Nobody bought the cheesy special effects they were going with to make it seem like the cage was electrified. Nobody fucking bought it. And the audience didn't buy it either. And they were booing. And they were voicing their displeasure. And it's a shame that happened, because it's like, why do you need to lock them inside of an electrified cage? Why can't they just have a cage match? Oh, wait, it's lockdown, and you have to make every fucking cage match different, you fucking animals. But in any case, yeah, the electrified cage match is stupid. If you do it for real, it's too dangerous. If you fake it, it's going to look fake, and there's nothing you can do to make it look real. So best to not do it. Lesson learned, and nobody, as far as I know, has done it since. Thank God. All right, number 2. One of the most infamous matches in WCW history, from Halloween Havoc 1991, the Chamber of Horrors, a match that has made it onto my top 10 list before. It was actually on my list last year where I talked about best matches to watch at Halloween time. And like I said, this match, it feels like a Halloween party. You know, your favorite wrestlers are having a Halloween party inside of this cage, and it's a really stupid match. It's like a shitty version of War Games, but it's funny bad. It's one of those hysterically bad matches that I kind of look at and go, oh, this is... I could watch that match every day. It's so hysterical and how stupid it is. Again, more on that later with the number 1 pick, but the Chamber of Horrors, I've already talked about it before, so I don't want to dwell on it, but like I said, if you're in the mood for something silly, and if you want to watch Abdullah the Butcher placed into an electric chair and being played up like he died to lose the match, check this out. It's a hoot. It's a stupid hoot, and I highly recommend watching it. But number 1, my pick for the worst cage match variation of all time, also a hilariously bad match that I highly recommend you guys watch, just because of how stupid it is. The Kennel from Hell from Unforgiven 1999, a match between the Big Boss Man and Al Snow, where they were locked inside of a steel cage with the Hell in a Cell structure around the ringside area. So it was a steel cage match and a Hell in a Cell. So you're thinking, okay, let's see what they can do with that. Again, it's like playing off the Tower of Doom idea. It's like the cage structure, it's like maybe they can do something cool with that. Maybe that can be something cool and something awesome. And they can do something creative with it. Oh, wait! Big Boss Man killed Al Snow's dog, so we have to involve dogs in the feud. Let's have rabid dogs around the ringside area between the Hell in a Cell and the steel cage match. It's like, well, fuck, they can't do anything then, because it's like, because there are dogs everywhere. Like, what the fuck? They can't safely do anything with dogs like barking and fucking and shitting everywhere. That's the part that people remember most for this match, is like the dogs were humping each other and the dogs were pissing everywhere and shitting everywhere, and that's just like, that pretty much sums up the match. It's like, yep, that sounds about right. That's about how this would go. And involving the dogs completely ruined any potential that this match had. I'm not saying that Al Snow and Big Boss Man could have had the greatest match of all time anyway, but it would have been better if they weren't limited by the fact that they had to deal with friggin' dogs, you know, that they had to avoid. In order to escape the cage. So it's a really, really astonishingly bad match. However, it is really funny and just goes to show like how far certain creative minds, I believe Vince Russo was still there at this point, will go to try and like shock people, or, you know, maybe reinvent the wheel or try too hard to create something cool, when it's just, dude, sometimes unless you have like a really, really good idea on how to really reinvent the steel cage match, like a War Games, like a Hell in a Cell, like an Elimination Chamber, or like the Lion's Den, the unloved cousin of the good steel cage match variations, you probably shouldn't do it. And the Kennel from Hell is one that they probably shouldn't have done. But it is funny, and I do recommend watching it. So there is that. So yeah, that comprises my list of the absolute worst cage match variations that professional wrestling has ever offered, or at least the worst ones that I've seen. God knows, like, there could be worse ones out there that I've never seen before. So if you have any, mention them in the comments below, because I'd be very curious to know what else is out there. But that is all I have for you now. So thank you all for watching. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow me on Twitter, hit the little bell in the corner so you get notified when my new videos are posted. And that is all I have for you now. So peace out, enjoy the rest of your week, and I'll see you all later.